Mariana Cordier. Welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. Every January, there is a count of the homeless population to let the nonprofit community and the government know how many people need services to find a secure place to live. Betsy Bowman, the director of the Adult and Community Services at EveryMind, will explain how the count happens. Domestic violence victims with children face serious problems that often include homelessness, and sometimes Montgomery County fails the victims of this violence. Graciela Rivera-Oven, who has one such story, is here to report. Next week, Montgomery History will host an all-day conference on Saturday, January 26th, to bring together people from all walks of life in the county to discuss and learn about local history, including topics such as the 1950 housing boom and the Underground Railroad in the county. Matthew Logan, the executive director of the organization, has the story. A new federal funding bill entitled CHIME was introduced in the Senate recently, and its requirements may have important implications for future funding of health centers nationwide. Sonya Bruton, the Chief Operating Officer, CCI Health and Wellness Practice, will explain the proposal. So EveryMind is a community organization that helps with the homeless.
One of the contracts we run, yes. So one of the teams I run is the Homeless Street Outreach, and they play a large role in the Point in Time, which is an annual HUD mandated count of the homeless populations. So the Street Outreach team runs what we call up county, and then there's a down county team that runs another group of individuals.
That's great.
And each team goes out on the 23rd to do a count.
And so this count that you are going to do is countywide. On what day will it be?
It's January 23rd, so coming up next week. The training starts at 9 p.m. All volunteers need to be registered, but it's a huge volunteer event. It's mostly run off of volunteers, and so we need a lot of individuals.
I'm not familiar with it. Is there a place, a website we can go to ask or sign up?
The county has the sign up, but we have the link to it on EveryMind. So if they go to every-mind.org, it's going to be right there on our rotating screen on the top. You can just click to sign up and then pick which location you want to sign up. Either the Rockville location, which EveryMind will run, or the down county, which is held in Silver Spring.
Betsy, does it have to be that the person has to be seen to be counted, or is it a conversation where they can tell you?
It does have to be seen. It is a physical count, but where we run the street outreach, it's just going to go out in the community looking for individuals that are unsheltered. The point in time count includes everything under homeless services. So if they're sheltered, if they're seeking the soup kitchens, any of those things within this specific time frame, they'll get counted. But it can't be just a verbal report. They have to be seen to be counted, and then they actually do a survey that allows them to be counted.
And if I've gotten away from my spot and nobody sees me on this night, what's the impact to me?
I mean, it is an impact to the county, as we want to have all of our people counted, right? We want to have that representation because the HUD affects funding, it affects decision for programming, but we know that it also is just a snapshot, right? So they dictate that it has to happen on one single day, on one single night. Montgomery County doesn't get to pick it to say, oh, well, we'll have a better count in 2 weeks. We go on the night that's dictated. And so we do understand that it's a snapshot. The Homeless Street Outreach works really diligently to make sure that all of our folks know it's coming. They're prepared for it. We talk to them about their plan, where you're going to be, where we're going to meet you, to make sure that those we know of are counted. But at the same time, we do know that that's a snapshot, that's an estimate, right? And so no one's saying that there were only X amount of people and that's it. But it is just looking at that snapshot on that specific day. Weather dictates that. Sometimes we have a better count than others, but we're hoping for a really good turnout on the 23rd with volunteers.
What's the number that we think of how many homeless people we currently have in the county? Or what was the number last year?
So the information from last year was recently just out. You can find it on the HUD exchange, as well as Montgomery County, I think, has the newest numbers up on the their homeless services page. I don't have the number directly in my head. They break it down to all of the different categories. And so where I'm looking at just street outreach, the numbers encompass a lot of other things. For just our programming, we're still seeing a lot of individuals that are out there on the street.
How many are in your program?
Are they hundreds, or are there thousands?
Like, definitely not thousands, but within Montgomery County, there's a lot of people. Definitely in, I would say, closer to 100 to 200 to 300, somewhere in there. And it really depends on whether you're talking about those that are sheltering versus those that are street outreach, that type of a thing.
Betsy,
so my
if I'm
programming is
out
only going to
there
be street outreach.
volunteering,
Yeah.
am I just walking down the street and keeping a number? Am I talking to people as I see
Yes.
them?
Yeah,
So the
this
9
is-
p.m. training will train you, every volunteer on what that's going to look like.
Got it.
So it's actually a great opportunity to get a real snapshot into this community and what that's going to look like for those that are curious. You're going to go out with a trained team lead who's either done it before or is one of my trained staff, and they're going to go out with 2 or 3 people on the team. You're going to know the survey. You're going to have a little bit of role play practice before you go out with how you engage. We have some items that we go out to because we're walking up to people that are going to be strangers perhaps to your team and saying, hey, can I talk to you? Right? So we've got some things that we do to try to help that engagement, to try to say and make it worth their time as well to get them to participate in the survey. So for a volunteer that's new to an event, it's a really fantastic time to volunteer because you get to go out in that team. You get to get the training. You get to have all of that experience, and it's only a one-night commitment.
And what's the follow-up?
The follow-up on the outreach team is we take all of those individuals and then specifically try to find them or locate them or follow up with them. So in the survey, we ask contact numbers, emails, where they're normally found, because sometimes we may find them where that's not their normal spot.
Right.
And then the homeless outreach team spends the next however long we can trying to engage in those individuals. Some of them may be known to us, but some may be new. And so that's the work of the homeless outreach team's follow-up is specifically that, trying to locate every individual that was found on the pit night that may not already be known to us.
And do you need a lot of volunteers?
It is a huge manpower event. So over the county, we need anywhere from 100 to 120 volunteers, and it's split between the 2 locations. So up county, we're really hoping that we get 60 to 75 volunteers, and our count is not there yet.
Okay.
And down county, they need about the same. So
And so
volunteers are
you
still
have about
needed.
15 seconds left. What's the last 15 seconds you want to say to the?
The only last thing I want to say is really that we really do rely on volunteers. And so whether it's this event, whether it's an event in the future to connect, if you have any interest in volunteering for the Homeless Street Outreach, you can connect with us. We have lots of volunteer opportunities outside of this as well.
Thank you so much, and I
Thank
hope
you.
you'll come back to the show. Betsy. Grace Rivera-Oven, you are talking about homelessness as well, but it's a little bit different.
It is a little bit different. So, I'm hoping that with the person that I'm helping currently, I can bring some light into some of those issues that we're having.
Well, so why
with,
don't we start
so
first
I'm
with?
talking specifically about domestic violence victims who in this case, I'm just going to call her Elizabeth for the sake of conversation. She has 4 children. She has been pretty much homeless since 2015, on and off, living with relatives and so on. And always going back to the father of the children because he helped pay for rent. So that kind of brought stability to housing, but then the physical abuse was always present. She ended up in the hospital 3 times with all kinds of injuries. And the last time she was attacked in broad daylight in a store. So it just gives you a glimpse of the abuse that, he felt that he could do this publicly, what he has done to her in the privacy of their home. So she was taken to the shelter. So the issue that I'm seeing and very concerned about is that there's not really a one point of entry where we can do wraparound services to help these victims navigate the system.
So I've heard when I've done the domestic violence cases in the past, wearing my other hat as a lawyer, the push I hear often is that the Family Justice Center is exactly
Correct.
that. So they're supposed to be somewhat helping with wraparound services.
Correct, if the victim knows about it. And here's the issue. So she had never was informed about the Family Justice Center, which should be one of the point of entries. She didn't find out to it until after she actually got the protective order. She went to court by herself with the children to get the protective order. And until she was well into almost at the end of her stay at the shelter, she found out that the Family Justice Center
So I've learned
existed.
from you earlier. You were saying there's only so much time they can remain in the shelters. How does
Correct.
that work?
Correct. So there's a limited time. Usually it's a 60-day stay. She was at the Betty Ann Cranky shelter for 68 days. There's supposed to also be a somebody that is contacted at HHS with the homeless services to help her then look at alternatives for housing, maybe apply for some vouchers and so on to help her then do a transitional. And unfortunately, in this case, did not happen until she had 2 days left at the shelter. So she ended up in a hotel with the kids. So she went from Gaithersburg to Silver Spring. In the meantime, she was taking her kids every morning to Tacoma Park Elementary to make sure that their school did not get interrupted.
When you say she went to the hotel, was that the hotel paid by the county, or
Right,
because she has no money?
so then she has 30 days there, right, to come up with a plan. And the issue that I had with this case, and this is not an isolated case, the issue that I have is that all the planning on coming up with a plan was put on the victim. And very little there was coordination. I mean, she met with her worker who was supposed to help her with this twice during this period. And when you're dealing with a volatile situation where she had not even been referred to the abused persons program, which counseling is a huge part of helping some of these women be able to become empowered and so on.
Great. So what else
But-
are we talking? So you're talking about the levels of instability. So there's counseling, you mentioned housing. How much of it is also employment, income?
Absolutely. So this, and I have to say, she has been called a survivor by HHS. She absolutely is, because she's been pretty much surviving since 2015, on and off. But all she needs at this point is, and this is where I have been very disappointed by the reaction. At this point, what she needs she needs a little bit of support to kind of give her that edge to get housing. I was looking at, helping her look for 2-bedroom apartments because she has 2 boys and 2 girls, so they have to have 2-bedroom apartments. It's required pretty much by law. And the average rent is $1,700, right? And so you add that, the food and so on. And instantly, she lost her food stamps during this period because she was in a shelter. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, so we need to do a lot better.
So if you
at
don't
making
meet the
sure.
deadline, if that 30 days
So
passes.
pretty much the 30 days, she was going to be kicked out of the hotel this past Monday. I'm so glad that our new council member, Gabriel Munoz, who's going to be the new head of HHS, was able to kind of intervene and to look holistically, because we're trying to help her find housing, but it's not an immediate thing. And to me, it's kind of like a partnership. All we have heard is, what is your plan? Where her plan is surviving with her children. And the last thing we want is for her to end up in one of your counts, living in a car with her children. Because really, that's not a plan.
Or
So
back to
in
that
the
cycle.
in the last 15, we only have 15. We're time's up. Well, this is such an important topic, one that I'm sure we can talk about all day long. I hope you'll come back and tell us more about what the outcome is for
I will.
Elizabeth.
I
So
will.
we have to take a break. We'll be right back.
Mom, can we get some ice cream? Please, Mom, please.
No, we're having dinner soon.
Please.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
In the small town of Elmira, New York, a boy was born into an all-American family. The odds of him achieving his dream in the fashion industry? 1 in 23 million. The odds of having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I am Tommy Hilfiger, and my family is affected by autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
For those dealing with the daily struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. That's why AARP created a community with experts and other caregivers to help us better care for ourselves and the ones we love.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
And we're back. So, Matthew Logan, welcome to the show and tell us about Montgomery History.
So Montgomery History is the county's historical society. We are celebrating our 75th anniversary in 2019.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And we have our annual history conference coming up on Saturday, January 26th. It's co-hosted by Montgomery College, and it'll be in their Germantown Bioscience Education Center. We have about 10 different experts.
So this conference, what is the purpose and what is going to be discussed?
So it's an opportunity. We provide a venue for people who want to present history. There's a lot of folks doing local history on all different aspects of the county's past. And it's an opportunity for people like policymakers to come because there's so much relevance to current situations. For instance, we've probably heard about the cemetery that has been uncovered in Westbard as part of the planning process there. So we have some folks who are going to give a history of that African American community.
That was terrible, by the way.
What's
that we were going to.
Exactly. It's complicated and it's.
That's where they were going to build upon. And
it has been built upon.
They
There's a
actually
parking
did.
lot over an
It was when they were
African-American
excavating,
center.
right, that they found.
And that's a long.
That was
old
an
story.
African American cemetery.
Correct. And so we have another session on our opening session is from Washington Post columnist Gene Meyer is going to talk about coming to terms with our southern past, our southern roots in this county. Many of us are new to the area and don't realize how deeply ingrained into that southern
I always found it
pre-Civil War culture
interesting when I talked to friends and such, and they were like, "Oh, you guys are the South. You're south of the Mason-Dixon line."
We're the South.
And I always felt that no, we were really more northern, but no, we were definitely the South.
You need to come to the conference. You'll learn a lot. We've got a very troubling past, our history as it relates to segregation, and there were lynchings here. There were it's definitely something that I think we need to examine and come to terms with before we can move forward in a kind of a multicultural.
I mean, there were
and
areas
diverse.
where folks could not buy homes and they had to buy.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically in certain areas.
And we have one session that's going to talk about housing. You know, the county's population doubled in the 1950s. And so that was a time in which there were restrictive covenants on property. So people either couldn't get home loans or they weren't allowed to purchase
Is there a date
properties.
range that narrows the conversation of the presentations, or is it?
It's, like I said, there's about 10 different different sessions. The oldest is a session on archaeology. And then we have ones that are dealing with, there's a very modern contemporary topic of a survey of all these burial sites and cemeteries. And so the people who have been conducting that, kind of a point in time type of effort, a lot of volunteers have gone out, they've been trained identifying these sites, and they're going to report back on their findings. So it's all over the map, really.
And is there a website to find out more about the event and attending? Do you have to buy tickets? Is it free?
Yeah, no, there is a registration required. It's all day. It begins at 9 in the morning and it goes through the afternoon. If you go to montgomeryhistory.org, and then we have a drop-down menu for our events, you'll see the 2019 History Conference, and you can register online.
And you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the students of, is it Richard Montgomery?
No, it's Rockville High School. They're doing a wonderful project where they have gone out and they've interviewed their family members to find out how they ended up in Montgomery County. So many of them are local or from other states in the U.S. Many, probably 3/4 of them, come from countries all over the world. And so not only are they going to be sharing some of those stories at the conference, they're installing an exhibit at our Bell Dawson House in Rockville. And so that exhibit is going to be open beginning on February 2nd.
Now, is this something that I would bring a variety of members of my family to and we'd find something, or is it more for people that are academically talking about?
Not at all. So certainly there's some people who come with a very academic approach. There's a lot of folks who, like that cemetery survey, it's really for everyone.
So it's for everyone.
It's
and that would be
very
the last
much for
word.
everyone. Thank you
You'll have
very
to come
much.
back and tell us
Exactly.
more, and the anniversary's in June, right?
That's correct.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So CCI and the Health Wellness Center has the funding, interest in this funding, correct?
Absolutely. We are looking for reliable and stable funding from our federal funding partner. So in this environment where we have seen what can happen when money is not allocated, approved, and ready to flow, things can just stop.
So I have to ask you, because I know in everyone's mind about the furloughs and the government shutdown, how does that affect this, if it does at all, and what is the purpose of the funding?
Yeah, at this point, we're not affected. What it has allowed us to do is look and become a lot more proactive about looking ahead and realizing that come September this year, our funding ends. And so if there's not a new approved appropriation, we would be just like these federal workers and the beneficiaries that they work on behalf of, and we would not be receiving money. What it does for us is provide that stable funding that allows us to recruit and hire our physicians. So if I were to hire a physician right now, make you an offer because you're a physician looking for a job, you're probably going to have to give 3 months notice to where you are. And if you're going to leave where you are, you're going to want to be sure that you can now have a career with me. And to do that, we have to have stable and reliable funding. So what this would do for our organization is it provides that safety net of funding, about $4 to $5 million for us, that is stable and allows us to guarantee salaries, pay our rent, to have us set up so that we can still make program income. We do make money when people come to us, but that stuff that foundations don't like to fund,
Sure.
and that patient volume doesn't take care of.
For everyone who doesn't know who CCI is, what is the services that you provide to the county?
We are a federally qualified health center, which is why part of our funding comes from the federal government, and we provide primary care. That's everything from prevention, your physicals, your vaccinations, we do sick visits, we manage people's chronic conditions, diabetes, hypertension. We run the refugee health program. We do those screenings to make sure that people are healthy when they're allowed to come into our communities and stay residents in our country. We provide behavioral health so that we provide for the whole of someone's health, the mental as well as the physical. And so we do that in about 8 locations throughout the county and serve about 30,000 residents here in Montgomery County.
That's fantastic, and congratulations for that work.
Thank you.
And one of the programs that I thought was striking was for the young people, for young adults, if they need to, they're still in their homes with their parents, could still come and seek services from CCI. So.
Absolutely, through our Title X funding, which is another federal pot of money that we receive that allows people to get their care even when they don't have dollars to pay for them. So a student or a teenager or anyone at any spectrum of the life cycle who doesn't have coverage or needs to have their confidential care taken care of, it could be a victim of domestic violence who wants to come in and have her medical needs met. We can do that based on that person's income level and that person's needs.
That's great. And so it's in the Senate.
It has been
and it has to go to
co-sponsored.
the House.
It's been co-sponsored by a Republican senator from Missouri, Roy Blunt, and a Democratic representative, Debbie Stabenow, from Michigan. So it has bipartisan support. It is really meant for, it stands for Community Health Improvement, Modernization, and Excellence Act. It allows us to improve our services, the number of people that we serve, keep our facilities up to code and a facility that can serve anyone that comes into them, and it allows us to keep excellent quality care for everyone who comes to see us.
And
We'll
so
say for our population, for the homeless population, most of them will use CCI.
Yes.
In the different populations that I've worked with, it's a huge component of their medical care. So having that and knowing that that could be a loss is something that is very important to a lot of different communities.
it could be very impactful.
It would
Certainly,
definitely
yeah.
impact our scope. You know, we'll be around. We're not 100% reliant on the federal government, but it would force us to scale back on what we could do, and it would make us a less advantageous employer for the vacancies that we have.
I think the best thing that people can do is call their congressman, say
Absolutely.
that they support and the thing that you have going for you, that is a very supported bipartisan.
And we can
bill.
already thank Ben Cardin in the Senate.
Absolutely.
He has co-sponsored this, but we do need folks to let their House of Representatives know that we need the support here in the county.
Is Mr. Raskin supportive?
He usually is,
I
with
would
someone that we
expect
can
he would
count
be.
on.
Yes, yeah.
But we also want to keep it as a top priority for him and others.
Absolutely.
And so if anyone would want more information about CCI or how to support, where would they find this information?
They can go to cciweb.org and find out all that they'd want to know about our services, and they could call anyone, the number on the homepage, and ask for me, or anyone else can help with information.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing that with us. That's really important. I hope everyone in the audience will call their House representatives so that we can get Chime passed. Thank you all for joining me here on the show, and thank you, the audience, for joining us. This week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Mariana Cordier. Please join us next week at the same time.